Okay, class, this is Mrs. Norris, and this is Algebra 2, Chapter 9, Section 5. Remember, we're just kind of doing a hodgepodge little mini chapter here on all the stuff involving functions. I'm dedicating this lesson to the University of Kentucky Wildcats, both men and women. It is March Madness time, usually around the time we do Chapter 9, so why not? Big fan here, you know that. Alright, so let's start this lesson real quick. I'm going to just talk for a little bit. I want you to look at your handout. You should have your handout in front of you. I expect you to take some notes on this. There's going to be times tomorrow where we have candy and or maybe some bonus point opportunities here, so I need you to really try to buy into this. So, this section is mostly about functions, but especially about their inverses. So we're introducing what we call the horizontal line test, if you want to underline that. The horizontal line test simply says this: if you can draw a horizontal line through a function when it's given to you in a graph form, and it passes just once, then we're good. Okay? If you draw a line and it only passes through once, then give it a thumbs up. Yes, the inverse is a function. Okay? If you draw a horizontal line, like in this example, in the second example here, and it does pass through twice, then you're going to say that the inverse is not a function. Okay? It passes through more than one point on the graph. Now, you should be thinking to yourself that something should come to mind here. What is it? Go ahead and write it down if you think of it. You should have written down the vertical line test. So somewhere on your paper, write down vertical line test. The vertical line test is to see if the original function is a function. The horizontal line test is simply to decide, will its inverse be a function? So we can quickly do 1 through 4. Number 1 is a simple parabola, and you can tell that if I do the horizontal line test, that the inverse, so let's write the inverse of that function is not a function. Okay, inverse is not a function. You can write simple no if you want to. Number 2, here's okay, here's okay, here's okay, here's okay. So the answer is yes. The inverse is a function. Okay, try number 3 and 4 on your own. You're just checking to see if the inverse of that function is a function. Okay, the back part of your reteach notes talk about actually finding the inverses. So this is kind of a repeat. We've already done this. So it actually walks you through the steps here, which we have written down several times in this class. If my function is given to you as this, and I want to write the inverse, then I'm going to follow certain steps. Step 1 is just to replace y where f of x is. So they put the y where f of x was. Step 2 is what we always do. We switch x and y. So we put x where y is and y where x is. Step 3 is then to solve for y. So here's where we started at. We're going to add 1 to both sides. That gives me x plus 1 on the left equals y squared. And then to get to y now, we're going to take the square root of both sides. You can see that written on your paper. The answer is y equals plus or minus square root of x plus 1. In the previous chapter, we finished it by writing this, that the inverse function is plus or minus the square root of x plus 1. Because y could have two different values, because it's plus or minus, it could be a plus or it could be a minus, and what we do now is we say that the inverse is not a function. You can also check by graphing the original function on your calculator. Okay, you should try that. Y equals, remember. Let's graph the f of x, and then let's graph let's check, the original graph and do the horizontal line test, and you'll see that it fails. So let's quickly talk about the domain and range. Sometimes we kind of skim over this. We've done it a few times. The domain and range of the function, remember, has to do with, the domain has to do with the x values that are possible. Well, in this function, since we know that x has to be greater than or equal to -1, because if it was less than that, it would give us a negative in the square root, and we can't have negatives in the square root. So that's how you find your domain. What you can do to make this easy is you can set x plus 1 equal to 0. We know that it has to be greater than or equal to 0 in order to be able to take the square root. So we get x equals -1. That makes our domain x greater than or equal to -1. The range of the new function of f to the -1 of x, the inverse, can be any number, okay, because we can get plus or minus that square root, so we say all real numbers. You can also look at your graph for that. We'll spend more time on that in class tomorrow. Okay, let's do these two example problems quickly. Number 5. Number 5 walks you through the first couple of steps. So remember, the step 1 is to replace f of x with y. So all they did was put a y there. That's pretty simple. Step 2 they've done for you here is they switched x and y. So they put x where y is and y where x is. Now step 3, remember, is simply to solve for y. So let's undo everything that's happening to y. First thing we have to undo is we have to subtract 3 from both sides. So we're going to get x minus 3 on the left-hand side. These two are going to cancel, equals the square root of y. Now how do you get rid of the y? Remember, I told you this all ties in. We're going to square both sides to undo that square root. What happens next is we get x minus 3 quantity squared equals y. Okay, let's go on to number 6. We'll come back to domain and range and we'll do both of them at the same time. Number 6 is asking us to, remember, go back and read the directions. It says find the inverse and then write the domain and range for the inverse. So, first step, replace f of x with y, switch x and y, solve for y. Change colors on this one, subtract 1, subtract 1. I get x minus 1 equals 2y. Those two cancel. Dividing both sides by 2, I get x minus 1 over 2 equals y. So the inverse of x equals x minus 1 over 2. Now, just so I can rewrite this so it looks like something you're familiar with, this is just the slope-intercept form of a line. And if I put the 2 under both parts there, this is what it looks like. So you can see this is my slope, and that's my y-intercept. So you can probably realize that the domain is going to be all real numbers, and the range is actually going to be all real numbers. This is just a line, okay? So if you're ever having trouble figuring out domain and range just from looking at the function, type it in as a y equals on your calculator. Okay, take some time to look at that and you'll see that it's just a line. You could have even typed in y equals x minus 1, all in parentheses, divided by 2. You're still going to get a line. Okay, to finish off, let's just talk about the domain and range for number 5. So basically, when you do domain and range, remember, let's do the domain and range for the original function. Okay, I'm just going to show you what the graph looks like. I put it on my graphing calculator, and just so you know, the square root parent function looks like that. Okay, remember, it's like the rocket ship kind of taking off, just like a swoop, I called it. But we have to go up 3. So we're going to take that graph, and that's what the up 3 means. So we're going to go up to 3, and the swoop goes like that. So that's f of x. When we graph the inverse function of that, it's going to look like this. We're going to go over to 3, and we're going to swoop around kind of like that. And remember, they have to make a symmetric, be symmetric about y equals x line. So the red is the inverse function. So what is its domain and range? Well, we take the domain and range of the blue function, and we flip them. So the blue function has a domain of, notice that x is greater than 0 right here. and y is greater than 3. Okay, to be y is greater than or equal to, and x is greater than or equal to. So my domain and range of my inverse function, we just switch those two. The domain is x is greater than or equal to 3, and the range is y is greater than or equal to 0. You guys did very well on this on the test, so you know what I'm talking about. You switch them. The domain and range, you switch from the original function to, from f of x to the inverse, you just switch places. Okay, your homework is to spend a few minutes and do the practice A worksheet that's stapled to the back, and I will see you guys later. By the way, if you forgot any of your papers or you don't have them because you are not at school Friday, I'm going to go ahead and put those on the wiki too so you can print them out and do this video. See you guys tomorrow.